First, it seems from this morning that the proper way to start is with a confession. So I will confess that when you read Robert and his comments about survey researchers, he's actually talking about me. And David Leonard commented about how survey research absolutely bombed in the SRDP project. That was also me. But I should explain a little bit because, of course, we survey researchers always externalize our errors onto someone else. In that case, they had a whacking great questionnaire I had designed, and almost a national sample all over Kenya, several thousand respondents, huge amount of work, all pre-coded, which in those days nobody did. And we had it all onto IBM cards within 3 months and ready to go to analyze. We hired a PhD economist from Makerere to do the computer work, and the bloody idiot couldn't do it. And if you know Judith Hayer and I, we were getting very, very worried because the donors were waiting for the survey results and everything. What we didn't know is we were using an ICL 1900 software program that had just been issued by ICL without debugging. And it never did run for anyone. And our poor psychologist, it was not his fault, it was the fault of the software. That data, all punched in on computer cards, remained in boxes and migrated around the University of Nairobi and eventually ended up in an economic professor's office, and when he died, it disappeared. So Robert has a point about Okay, so 5 minutes, 5 points. First thing, it strikes me about Robert, if you know him, that his later work is positioned not where he started, when David and I knew him. When he started, it was efficiency, the connection between inputs and outputs, which economists believe is 90% of output, and the rest of us believe is about 40% of output. So Chambers has moved, so he looks at people and activities, that 50% of mysterious, what used to be labeled X efficiency, that can't be measured and accounted for in terms of economics. Now, why that's important is it explains what economists would call the robust nature of his findings. The bloody clients are always there complaining. The paradigm changes, the projects change, the donors change, but the clients bear the costs. Roberts looked at the clients, so he has a 50-year track record. I was trying to think of the people equivalent to that. Peter Drucker, Henry Mintzberg, Michael Chernia, just retiring now, also having his due now. And that's about it in Robert.
Elizabeth Colson, a woman.
So in any case, women or men, this is a very long and productive record. And the point is that he chose the good part. He chose the things that last. The involvement of farmers and beneficiaries and villagers is always an important issue. And that's sort of where he started. That's where he ended in Africa and then really developed in Asia. But that wasn't where he began. When we knew him, he was all into efficiency, and I was the one saying, hey, maybe we should look at what the women are doing, and what the healthcare and other things are doing. Now, secondly, if you do focus on the clients, then Robert picked up very rapidly that it might make sense to talk to them first and to talk to them at the end before you sort of launch a new technology that they don't particularly want. So he formalized it with the farmer first and last. We're supposed to look at the future. It would be nice if large organizations actually learned that today, 40 years later. 40 years later, there's still those that don't really get into that. But in any case, that's where Robert started. Now, what he discovered quickly is, as you would know, you can't stop there. Pretty soon you get into, you have the in-between. The farmers not only have to be first and last, they have to own the change. And of course, that's where PRA and everything comes in. Okay, point number 3 is when you begin to talk to these, and I'll call them farmers, but we realize today it's urban, peri-urban, it's not just farmers, but the clients, if you want. You discover most of them live in overdetermined systems. Now I'm using economists' language. An overdetermined system means you have about 20 reasons why things are going screwy. In that situation, you can't have a PhD on each of the 20 reasons. So Robert picked up on Ilchman's optimal ignorance, You got to decide early which of the things you just either can't study or must ignore. And Donald Rumsfeld, as far as I know, is the main policymaker who got it. Now, Emily Rowe actually gave a wonderful seminar in this room just 2-3 days ago where he addressed this. Our use of Ilchman was not exactly his use. What Robert really did was to say fuzzy sets, basically a multimedia, triangulation, as we used to call it in sociology. You learn a lot if you can bring to bear several different lines of inquiry because you don't have to push them to the ultimate end. The amount of money you have to spend to move from 80% confidence to 95% confidence is enormous. So if you can stop at 30% confidence, given that business stops at 20% confidence, hey, do it. Okay, number 4 then, this then leads automatically as you begin to look at these people to the missing P's, if you want. We have policies, paradigms, programs, and projects. We didn't have participation, power, and perceptions. And so Robert really shifted the debate from the one side to the other side. And I would say that is his real lasting contribution as a specialist and as an activist to empower the other side of the equation. Given that donors are always going to have paradigms, they're always going to have projects, they're always going to have programs, but let's have both sides present at the table. Okay, and then that led, and you have to know that in the late 70s and 80s, integrated rural development was very fashionable. So Chambers, as usual, turned it on its head and said integrated rural poverty, playing on integrated rural development, and then looks at isolation, physical weakness, powerlessness, poverty, vulnerability, comes up with concepts of gaps, nets, ratchets, I found particularly useful. So there are a whole new set of terms that he introduced, and those are still very powerful and useful. That integrated poverty framework can still work and still applies to many of these rural communities. Now lastly, and this will hand over to Gordon Conway very nicely, is this question of livelihood security. And that really came out of seasonality and the idea we began to find that what farmers really want is a little bit of security. Incidentally, that's what most of us professionals would like. And that's very different from income maximization. And essentially what we've seen is just the opposite. And this is what I find very disturbing. Because I worked most of my career alongside economists, they think factor mobility is just great, wonderful for the system, increases efficiency. And so you get a lot of ex-pastoralists poaching and selling marah and doing various things and brewing tea, which we call then a multi-occupational pattern. And that is the opposite of livelihood security. So I'm sure Gordon will then fill in how the concept, but livelihood security then came into Robert's vocabulary after he moved to Asia. I'm not accountable for it. I'm happy to turn over to Michael and Gordon.